What's up, fellas? Ladies, what's on there? Everybody hear me?
Yeah, what's up, Brett?
Got you, Brett.
Well, first off, Happy New Year. New year we're upon. Been a while, so obviously I know you talk with Barry here in a minute. I just thought if I had a little bit of time here at the front end, talk about some events. Obviously, the game changer today, right, was a new schedule. Was told by the Big Ten, maybe even a couple months ago, just with what happened with the COVID, that they were looking at rescheduling things this year and playing it out. I knew one of the big things that was going to change. We were set really to go to Penn State 3 years in a row after the COVID year. So I thought that was something that was going to change, and we weren't really told anything other than that changes were coming. So got that information. Obviously, doesn't change what we had as our opener, and really just essentially play all the same games. The only one that's different is playing at Indiana. So we'll adjust and adapt to that and make it play out. Like I've always said, right, we'll just tell me the rules and we'll play, right? And the schedule is the schedule. So I think it's interesting. It gives us a 3-week window, a bye week, a 4-week window, and a bye week in 5 games. I believe 5 of our first 7 are at home. So to have the advantage of that, I guess, is a good point. But obviously on the back end of the year, we're the only team in the conference to have 2 away games at the end of the year. Everything has its story, but I think that's the biggest one, right? The 2 bye weeks that we gained from playing in a week 0 game. I really like those bye weeks this year. I thought it was advantageous for us to have those for our growth, our development. Next year is year 2. We're going to be a little bit further along, but I think those bye weeks are critical things to take advantage of, and for us to have those 2, to at least have it evenly spaced and not have them on top of one another plays into our favor, I believe. So that's there. Obviously, on campus here today, I can't really talk specifics because there's still some NCAA rules involved, but we have our early enrollees starting here on campus today. They'll go through a process here today, tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to get them ready for classes and everything to begin on Tuesday. So not only do classes begin, that'll be our start of our winter program. So Tank and his crew have got things lined up. We got an 8-week window. Basically, the first 8 weeks of school, we'll go through a winter conditioning plan that involves, basically 5 days of work for us with our kids during the course of the week. There's a limited number of hours. You could spend 8 hours a day with them until we get to spring ball. So we'll go basically from that first week, even though we can't start work with them until Tuesday. We'll work with them 8 straight weeks of off the field, some positional meetings, very limited time window that you can use. 8 hours sounds like a lot for a week, but it's really not when you're spreading it out over 5 days. So the first couple of weeks, they'll be doing a lot of work with Tank and his crew while we're on the road recruiting the last 2 weeks of January. Then we'll get heavily involved in week 3, individually with our players on the field as well as off. But these last 2 weeks in January, as coaches, we'll be on the road every day. We'll treat that really kind of almost like an early spring recruiting. We're pretty much done with our class of this year. There's going to be a few modifications, but for the most part, 22 is behind us. And then we'll focus on 23, 24s and jump into it. The only transition we had was with Coach Lunney. So he'll primarily take over Coach Peterson's recruiting world in the same area here in Illinois. Minnesota, we might share that with a couple different people. And then Coach Lunney has a pretty vast experience when I was with him in the South, obviously within Arkansas, but Oklahoma, Texas, anything in that region. And he'll be, of course, a natural recruiter of national quarterbacks as well as any offensive player. So we'll have our work shut out for us there. I like the way the schedule lays out. We'll go 8 weeks. I love doing an 8-week window of training altogether. Then we'll go into our week of spring break and then 5 straight weeks of spring football. After 5 straight weeks of spring football, we'll go through a couple of weeks on campus with our guys. We'll hit the recruiting trails for our spring recruiting, give the kids a couple mandatory discretionary weeks off, and then we'll come back and work them June and July to come back in and probably report almost the exact same fall schedule in early August to get us ready for week 0. So really, that's kind of an update in the program. I think you guys got a pretty good grasp on the players that we signed. I can comment on those guys that are here on campus, but we will add some transfer players that we can't actually comment on them physically until they're enrolled in our classes on Tuesday. And then as well as some non-scholarship PWO guys that will be joining us as well, that I can't really comment on them until they're enrolled in student and involved in classes. So that's kind of prohibitive there. But with that, I guess I'll open it up for any questions, and then I'll talk about Coach Lunney before I turn it over to him.
Brett, I didn't know if you're going to address just why did you want to make this change from Tony to Barry?
Okay, so if we just transition, nobody has anything about the program, and we'll jump into it. You know, I like I said when I came here, right? Wanted to bring in an offensive and defensive coordinator that I thought could make us into the Illinois offense, and you know, I like the progress that we made. We definitely played our best football at the end of the year, especially in the Northwestern game. But really just felt for us to take the next step offensively and as a program here, after being in the league for a number of years, being out of it during my time at Arkansas, then the 3 years in the NFL, I just felt for us to take the next step offensively was going to really just help not just our offense, but our program, right? And for me as a head coach to continue to grow. I think when I was in the SEC, you really saw the evolution of football, especially at some premier programs that went to some up-tempo, no huddle, still balanced in their numbers, but ran the ball in maybe different fashions. Coach Lunney and I were together at Arkansas. I hired him. He was actually an offensive coordinator at high school locally, but had been a guy that had played in the Arkansas system, had a great reputation in the coaching world. Brought him in and interviewed him and knew right away where I wanted to go. Once I was with Coach Lunney, I believe it was maybe year 2 or 3, maybe even we actually divided our special teams up at the time to we didn't have the 10th coach, so we made our coaches, every coach kind of had a special team assignment. And the reason I did that was I thought it maximized our staff, but I also like to watch coaches who aren't coordinators at the time learn how they can run the room. And so I put Barry in charge of our punt team. And it was something he had never done. The system we ran wasn't even a system he had been around, but I taught it to him, or he learned it through our system. And then I watched him coordinate it. And I did that for 2 reasons. I thought he'd be great for the room, but also I wanted to watch and see and learn him as a potential coordinator. If I had stayed at Arkansas, I knew eventually I would have transition offensively. We'd been able to have success there and put up good numbers. I thought we might transition. I was kind of doing a coordinator in waiting with Barry. Unfortunately, when that changed for me, it was a fortunate thing for Barry. He stayed there. And then obviously the last 2 years at UTSA, I've seen what he's been able to do as an offensive coordinator, right? He took that program to new levels of success. I saw it firsthand as a competitor and witnessed it overall. You know, as I decided to make transition, I began to look at different offensive coaches, different offensive styles, different programs, and I just kept gravitating back to Coach Lunney at UTSA. Conversations I began to have with him and even with their head coach talked about what Barry was able to do to install, to implement, to put in his own verbiage and language. And then after I transitioned from Tony, really just was impressed with Barry's knowledge, how he built this package, how he communicates his package, the terminology. One of the things that jumped out to me right away was when he used the term tempo. So it's a tempo offense with a pro style influence. That really kind of jumped out to me and something that fit really quickly into what we were already currently doing. So made this transition to give Barry a chance to come in here, install really a lot of the same things he had at UTSA as far as the way they're calling it, the verbiage, the huddle system, the techniques, but really put a style on it here at Illinois that factors into what our player strengths are. And ever since I've been around Barry, we've always talked about maximizing player strengths and minimizing player weaknesses. You know, whoever ends up being the quarterback here in the season ahead is going to be great driving force to what we do, right? And I think that's a conversation I've had with Barry that excites me. Is he's obviously got a system in place that is very balanced. Anytime you have production in a running game and a throwing game, the way that they have, and the way it ranks nationally is very, very eye-opening. But also for me to have familiarity with him on just a certain core belief in how games are won, right? You may have a team that needs to have the ball rushed X number of times to win a game, or you may have a team that you got to throw the ball around X number of times to win the game. Whatever we got to do to win is what we're going to be able to do. As far as that was the driving force, right? Had a great conversation with Tony. Obviously, these situations aren't easy, but really expressed to him how much I appreciate what he did and how he did it. A great asset to us when he came here and the things that we were able to accomplish. But I just wanted us to go a little bit different direction. Also, a little bit of more a system that is in place that feels good, that's had success, and now he'll teach it to our other coaches. So Barry will be the only new face in the room. Much the same when I took over my first time as a coordinator, I was the only new face in the room. So I had to teach the entire group what our system was. And that's what I've asked Barry to do. So he'll come in and be the guiding light and teach our offensive coaches what this system is, why it is, how it's communicated, but also how it can adjust to us here at the University of Illinois.
Thanks, Brett.
So with that, I'll open up for questions, anything along that lines, or if there's anything else, I'm free to hear.
Brett, not to get too nostalgic, but I know this is a relationship-based business, and I was curious how the difference in the initial conversation with Barry than almost a decade ago when you brought him into Fayetteville. Was a different kind of deal and than it was in 2013?
Yeah, I think you're right. The football is obviously driven heavy by schemes and terminology and X's and O's. But I really learned of Barry through his father, to be quite honest with you. A proven, long-time, very successful high school coach in Arkansas, and he was a very good agent for Barry. And I brought Barry in, and we had an interview, and was immediately just very impressed with who he is, what he was. While I was at Arkansas, Barry and I got very close. He has a wonderful family. He has a wife who's kind of this very special woman that at the time, when I first met him, I didn't have kids, right? Newly married, and Janelle, Barry's wife, and my wife had a great relationship. And then Barry had two boys at the time, were young men, Luke and Levi. And I had a kind of a moment where I knew I was having young kids, and I really and I even told Barry at one point, I don't know how many years ago, I learned a lot from him at Arkansas about Arkansas, but I also learned a lot about being a father. So it's different this time, but this move was made because I wanted to get a really good football coach in here, but because I knew him personally and what he's capable of teaching, that's why I made the move. I think he's an incredible teacher. He coached in high school football, right? So he literally had to walk the walk of being a teacher and instructor. That's very important to me. A lot of people can talk, very few people can teach. And I think he's an excellent teacher, which really gets me excited.
Thank you, Brett.
Yep.
Hey, Coach, happy birthday a day ahead of time. What's the cake of choice?
Bob, I know I don't look like it, but I'm not a big sweet tooth guy. So I don't think I'm in charge of the cake department. Actually, ironically, my wife's birthday is today. So I think she had the ultimate pull on what birthday cake we had combined. So I am excited. I've been in San Antonio the last couple of days with the coaches convention. Was able to get back. I didn't get home till about 1:30 last night. Flew into Indy late and drove over, and then was in early today. So I'm excited. I get to go home tonight and celebrate my wife's birthday, kind of my birthday, because tomorrow I'm on the road again. We're gonna make a little unofficial recruiting trip to try to recruit some guys back to our program that will take me out of town for my birthday. So whatever cake it is, it's going to be good, I'm sure.
Coach, I want to get back to spring ball. You mentioned you're going to have a new offense. Will the fans have a chance to see you this spring? Is there a spring game? What's the plan that way?
Yeah, so actually we've tweaked with the idea. We were actually kind of holding on our calendar until we found out what the rules were going to be COVID-wide coming in this semester. There's just been an uptick, in different things. So there was a point maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we weren't sure how we were going to have our guys this first first week when they get back next week, but it does look like we'll have everybody in the building, ability to work out wise. So I'm going to stay with the program. That last week, I have proposed to the powers of be possibly a Thursday night football game instead of a Monday night game. So that's where we're kind of leaning, but we haven't been able to solidify it. It'll either be hopefully on that Thursday or that Saturday, the last week in April.
Thanks, Coach.
As far as you guys being invited, you'll be invited on a limited basis. Obviously, we'll have transition. So, you know, one of the advantages to that would be that we'll be able to stay remotely silent on some of the stuff we're doing offensively, and the modifications we'll take defensively, but you'll probably have a little more access than you had a year ago.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Coach, in your kind of longer drawn out statement about Barry Lunney, you mentioned how the SEC has kind of changed what they did. Obviously, that kind of happened when you were at Arkansas with what Nick Saban did offensively. What is it about that kind of, to use a term that Barry uses, tempro style and tempo that you think can translate well to the Big Ten?
Well, two things. For us here at Illinois, I think you have to recruit to what you're going to be able to, you know, recruit effectively year in and year out. And I do think we're going to be able to get our hands on tight ends and running backs with my history and what we are. But I think the blending of one of the things that really jumped out to me with Barry's team, especially this year, to have 3 receivers with over 50 catches, the numbers they put up, and ability to throw the football. So I think a couple teams that we're going to play on our schedule, we probably able to we need to get the ball in the perimeter and get the ball out quickly in the passing game. And that's what this offense can do effectively. I've seen it happen. Some run pass options, as well as a different way to use the quarterback and the tempo that's really in his hands, right? Not only his hands as a quarterback, but also Barry as a play caller. As I watched UTSA's offense, I watched it in chronological order, and because I knew we played them early, so I, you know, obviously had seen the game that we played out, and then I watched, and each week there was never just as consistent. This is what they're doing. It was consistent what they were doing. But one week it might be a run game, next week might be a throw game, might be a run game that featured this type of run. The next week a different. They use different personnel. I still think 11 and 12 from the conversations Barry and I have had are going to be the forefront of our personnel groupings. But depending on the strength of our roster and the players that we're able to add in or discover, that'll drive us in the future. Again, I just keep going back to the ability to be balanced, the ability to use a tempo, and really the ability to play to our players' strengths and minimize their weaknesses will drive us.
Thanks, Coach.
Yep.
Hi, Brett. I know Barry's had some experience kind of recruiting some bigger time players at Arkansas. What does he kind of add to you guys as a recruiter?
Well, he'll have a decisive area that he'll recruit, but as coordinators, really him and Ryan have a smaller area than most of my coaches. So he'll be at task for that specific area, especially his region here in Illinois. But one of the things I love about Barry is that I've called this and said this a lot of times. Some of your premier recruiters are very ambidextrous, right? They can really blend into and recruit anywhere in this country. And I think Barry is one of the unique guys that can say that. I myself, I always remembered early on in my career, I would go in these areas that I never did before, but you could have success based on your personality, your demeanor, your professionalism. And I think Barry fits that category very, very well. So he'll go on the road with me starting as early as Friday. And I'll take him into really any offensive player that we want to talk about coming here to the University of Illinois, because he can really bring that value, and nobody can talk about this system better than him.
Thanks.
Okay, we're gonna move on to make a sub here, but I think you guys will be thoroughly enjoyed, and I couldn't be more excited about the transition to Coach Lunney here and bringing him in his first official day here in the building. So exciting day. I'll turn it over to Barry. Hold on.
All right, everybody. Good to meet everybody in the world of 2022 as it is, and excited to be able to get in front of you today for a little bit and answer some of your questions. First day on the job, like Coach mentioned, and it's been a whirlwind, but we're off and running. Mark Torsani, who's a dear friend of mine, who's Coach's chief of staff, as you guys know, has ran me around town. I've already been to the bookstore, had a good purchase already to start the day. My thumbprint's working. It's off to a good day. Let's see if we can keep it that way. So with that being my opening statement, obviously you guys open it up to questions, and let's get this thing started.
Hey Barry, Joey Wagner with the Illini Inquirer. Nice to meet you virtually here. Things obviously were going really well for you at UTSA. Why was this the right move for you to make this jump back with Bret and into the Big Ten?
Well, I think it's about relationships, right? The business is one of the reasons that I went to UTSA to begin with when I left Arkansas was because of the relationship that I'd formed with Jeff Traylor and the confidence I had in Coach as him as a head coach and what he was going to bring to the table. And I knew what he was going to bring to the table every day, and I knew the way he was going to lead and coach the program at UTSA. I had a lot of confidence in that. And so I could certainly say the same thing for this opportunity when it came about. With my history of working with Coach B for 5 years, I spent time on his staff at Arkansas, and he was a great mentor to me. I learned a lot during my transition from being in college early on, going into high school for a significant period of time, then back into the college game at my alma mater. Nonetheless, it was a great opportunity to be mentored, to learn from Coach as he came from Wisconsin. And so that, to fast forward 4 years later, and it's been it's hard to believe it's only been 4 years, but 4 years later, here I am with the opportunity to go to work with him in a different capacity. So it's about the same type of relationship and confidence that I had in Coach Traylor. Obviously, I had seen and that firsthand, had lived that firsthand working for Coach, and had seen the way he had led the program at Arkansas and the successes we had, even though it didn't end the way that we all wanted to. And then you take that relationship that I had with Coach B, and then you look around the building, and there's an extension of those relationships that I formed with Mark Torsani and Taylor Reed and Pat Pearson and Tank. I could go down the line of people that when I step in this building, there's a level of comfort and confidence in knowing that whose Coach has surrounded himself with. And so at the end of the day, even though it was a difficult decision because of relationships I had formed with, the coaches and players at UTSA, but obviously knowing what I'm walking into and having a familiarity with Bret was ultimately the deciding factor for me.
Thanks, Barry. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Joey.
Hey, Coach, I'll jump in. Sounds like I'm next up. Doug Bouchon from Rivals.com. Talking with Coach Bielema just now, it sounds like you're going to be bringing your playbook with you and installing it in the spring. Can you just describe that particular offense and what it's predicated on?
Well, I think Coach addressed it. I was here in the room as he talked about it. I thought he did a great job of kind of defining some of the parameters there. But, it's something that really, when Coach Traylor hired me at UTSA, he wanted to kind of blend some of his track record and experience. A lot of his track record and experience was kind of based on a spread system, and had actually been in the Art Briles system for a little bit. But he also, Coach Traylor knew about my experience in pro style under Jim Chaney and Dan Enos there at Arkansas, were two great influences for me from a philosophical standpoint, offensive strategy standpoint. Coach Traylor was interested in me being able to blend, those type of philosophies and beliefs to build what, would turn into our offense at UTSA. And it was a collaborative effort. Coach put me in charge of that. And so that system has kind of been vetted and, withstood the test of the last 2 years. And so that system that was, really successful for us. And obviously we had really good players and a really good coaching staff that I'm going to take that model and the terminology, like you said, the playbook, which is, it's not lugging around an old playbook. It's virtual, it's like, digital and all this stuff nowadays, but bringing the playbook here and teaching this system that, basically that we use the last 2 years is going to be the foundational aspect of what we do here. I mean, that's going to be the building blocks. And that was important for me to be able to come here and to take what we had been successful with from just a vernacular standpoint and start teaching it to these guys here. That was important. And Coach was, all about it, wanted me to do it, empowered me to do it. But obviously, we're going to have a different fit and flair here. It's not going to look exactly like it did with them, because ultimately we want to build this offense around our strengths, like Coach mentioned, and we're going to continue to get to know that. I am in particular through the spring, and ultimately, hopefully, by the time we'll get to the fall, we'll have an offense that's built around our player strengths. So ultimately, that's kind of how this all went when it came about, Doug.
Is there a particular skill set you're looking for from the quarterback position?
Well, I think it always starts with the ability to throw the football, right? I mean, that's where the quarterback has to start. And then after beyond that, it's like, well, okay, if they're a pocket passer and this system's got some flexibility to build around a pocket passer, if they have the ability to help them supplement the game using their legs, then certainly that's something that we want to expose. And I think that's what you saw over the last 2 years at UTSA. Obviously, Frank Harris was our starter for the majority of the time this past year, but the year before we had injuries and we had some shifts. We played 4 different quarterbacks. And so each week looked a little bit different depending on who was playing for us. And so, I think that's I think that's the way football is at this point in time, especially with the portal and the transition and guys transferring. Is like, your team and your offense and even the quarterback room in particular, that those guys typically come in all shapes and sizes. It's hard to recruit a room full of 5 quarterbacks that all have the same skill set, right? It's really hard to do that in this time and age in football. And so inevitably you're going to recruit guys that have a different strength and different weaknesses. And I think it's important to be able to have a flexibility within that system that you have to play to those strengths. And so that's kind of my mindset. I think it's a little bit kind of like my time in high school, right? You kind of held hostage in high school to who's in your system, who's coming up. And each year, maybe you might run the ball a whole lot more one year and use more play action. And the next year you may have a guy that's a better drop back guy, and you open up that aspect of your, strategy standpoint. You may have a guy that's a really good zone read runner, and you want to open that up. And that's certainly kind of what we experienced last year. So, ultimately it starts, it's a long answer to a real short question. You guys know you'll figure me out, and I'm really good at that. That I can give a long answer to a short question in a hurry, but ultimately it's about delivery of the football accurately, on time, sitting in the pocket, and then you build around the 6 skill sets that are on the peripheral there.
Thanks, Coach.
Am I looking in the camera the right way here, everybody? Because
You're good.
You guys are okay. This is a challenge because the camera's over here. You guys are here. I'm trying to stay focused here. Hopefully that's not too awkward for y'all. I'm sure my wife will correct me if she sees this, if I'm looking at it wrong. So we'll be better next round.
Well, hey, Barry, this is Scott Beatty, WDWS Radio. And since I'm radio, I don't care where you look. Great to meet you. Welcome to town. What you mentioned maximizing strengths. How familiar are you with the roster right now and what your strengths will be, and how in flux is that roster? And are you kind of waiting until all the pieces are there? And, obviously you may know more about the roster than even we do at this point, but are you still in a make it creating mode, or are you like trying to get it going right now?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, Scott. Is obviously playing against Illinois this year, I got a chance to see that a little bit, but to be honest with you, just didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that side of the ball. I had my own worries and concerns during that course of the game, but through the course of the season, because of my connection with Coach B and all the said guys I talked about earlier that are connected to this program, I had a vested interest just to watch and pull from afar Illinois football. So I got a chance to watch several of the games because of our games being at night or whatnot. So I could identify and see, some of those big wins that we had last year, obviously featured the running game. And I thought that was really impressive to watch the backs run. I think obviously one of the things about this that I can, just without question, say is one of the main reasons I'm sitting here before you all today is the fact that of my belief, my foundational belief is completely in line with Coach Bielema's belief about physicality. And it starts with, an identity of running the football, right? And so a physical brand of football. I think if you saw our football team play the last couple of years, we hung our hat on that part of it. And so I know that even though I'm talking here about building to our strengths and playing to our strengths, and that's certainly, yes, gonna happen. I think that's the job of all coaches, right? To play to your strength of your team and what your talent base is. And so as we get going here, and I think it's really premature for me to be able to say, you know, who's to say that maybe what was perceived as a weakness last year, that we can't help transition into something that's more of a strength, right? And so a new set of perspective, a new lens for coaches and players to be seen through each other. I've seen that really go well over the course of the years. You know, I've seen coaches and players with new perspective shift their belief about a certain player, or about a certain strength, or about even a certain weakness, you know. And so I think that that'll take care of itself over the course of time. But one thing that's not going to change, and one thing that we're not going to waver on, is the identity of physicality and toughness that's required to win in college football. And so it might look a little different. The way we're going to do that, it might be different than what was done here in the past, maybe a little bit different than what maybe we did at Arkansas a little bit. But, you know, our last year at Arkansas, 2015 under Dan Enos, you know, I think we threw for over 3,000 yards, all the while being effective and running the football too. And so as we can continue to recruit and shape and get to know this roster, I think those are things that will come out in the wash more towards the end of spring and towards the end of fall, you know, as we get closer to game time. But what's not going to waver is the identity that we're trying to establish in running the football.
Thanks a lot. Welcome to town.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Hey, Barry, it's Jeremy Warner from Illini Inquirer here. Welcome to town. I want to pick up on quarterbacks. You know, Frank Harris is a guy you kind of inherited on a roster. You're obviously inheriting a room of quarterbacks here. What's the key as a play caller, as a quarterbacks coach, to developing them and getting the most potential out of guys that you didn't handpick at the time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeremy. And really, to be honest with you, that's what we dealt with for 2 years there at UTSA. Everybody, you know, the main guys that have been playing the bulk of the snaps were guys that are already recruited there, that were already on campus. And so I think it's my job as the coordinator and quarterback coach to, you know, get in their minds, right? To really get to know them. And that was one of the things I think that we really saw a lot of growth with Frank, who it was our quarterback from year 1 to year 2. Is year 1, you know, we were basically limited with COVID. We were installing a new system. We didn't get a spring ball. We got a chance to get that 3-week jump start window before fall camp started. And we had 4 guys competing for the job. And as we ended up hitting the ground running, you know, we got into the season quickly without me really knowing our quarterback, you know, like really getting to know. And it's hard to know a guy without spring ball, right? Going through somewhat of a semblance of a fire, spring practice, spring scrimmages or whatnot. And so the jump between year 1 and 2 was really significant, I think, because I really started to understand him better and know him. So I think that's going to be one of my main challenges. And I don't mean that in a negative way, like a challenge, like an obstacle. That's going to be one of my main points of emphasis. And it's really helped shape my coaching career. It's really eye-opening the last couple of years, how significant that factor is when you deal with your quarterbacks, to know what makes them tick, to know what they're comfortable with, to know what they're not comfortable with, to know how to create success for them. What's their wheelhouse? What's their level of uncomfortability? If that's a word. If it's not, we ought to start using it like that. You know, what's their level of being comfortable with certain schemes or concepts? And so that'll be something that will be a huge priority for me here as I learn this roster. And as we look through the lens of the offense together, is what makes each guy tick, what's their strengths, what their weaknesses. And so to ultimately be able to empower them when it comes time for game time. You know, I'm just a really big believer in, you know, modern football, the way football's played. I mean, really, you play 75 plays a game, Jeremy, and the quarterback in most systems, obviously in ours, there's a lot of decisions to be made. There's a lot of decisions to be made during the game, whether it be pre-snap or post-snap. There's a lot on the quarterback. And so as much as you can eliminate gray for them, and as much as you can make that streamline, I think the better performance that you have a tendency to get out of them, to where they can play, they can let their natural abilities take over during the course of the game. And ultimately, that's my job as the coordinator, quarterback coach, is to let whatever the strengths are of these players that play, the quarterback that's on the field, to let those things be freed up to be able to play free within the system and to play with confidence.
Thanks, Barry. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Barry, Matt Stevens with IlliniGuys.com. I'll ask you the same question I just asked Bret. Was the phone call or initial contact any different nearly a decade than it was nearly a decade ago when you got the call from Bret to come to Arkansas in 2013?
Well, in a lot of ways, it was just as exciting for me, Matt. It was very, you know, obviously it was a couple of years, you know, 9 years ago, I believe. You know, that was obviously a huge break for me from a professional standpoint, getting, hired from a high school job to go coach at my alma mater. And, coach said, hey, I got a tight ends job. And I was like, I think I would have, I'd have coached the kickers or the holders, for an opportunity to go back to do that. And so it just so happened that it was a position that coach was really passionate about, that, the coordinators that, at the end of the day, we probably used the tight end as well as anybody in America during the period that we were there at Arkansas. And, when I first thought tight ends, like I thought, well, shoot, I can do that. I can go coach one guy and run around the field, and then all of a sudden we're in 12 personnel and 13 personnel. And it was a real challenge for me as a coach, and it helped me grow so much. And I know I'm shifting off the focus of the original question, but so here we are 9 years later. It's the relational aspect of it obviously is, I'm so much more comfortable with coach, than I was 9 years ago. Getting to know him every day was a new day. I think the first time I had him in the car, I think I tried to run a red light, and I didn't try to. I think I actually did, and I think he, I'm uptight. I'm just meeting him. I'm on the road. I'm taking him around Arkansas. Coach said, "You're gonna run that red light?" And I was like, "Well, look, it seems like I was trying to there for you, coach." But anyway, so that hopefully the next time I'm on the ground with him, we won't have any traffic issues. But the excitement was very similar. The opportunity was just really something that I just couldn't pass up, that I felt so comfortable with and excited about the challenge. And so my family and I, we're very grateful for coach providing this opportunity. We're ready to get going on it.
Thank you, Barry.
Hey, Barry, I'm Gavin. Good to meet you. Brett mentioned that a lot of people in this business can talk, but not everyone is a good teacher. I'm curious, what did you literally teach at Bentonville, and what did you learn from being in high school football and having so much success at that level?
That's a good question. By the way, Gavin, you said, Gavin, good to meet you, right? So that there's a lot of play on words there, Gavin. I like that. But anyway, I think that's a great question. It's, one year I remember Coach, he had us do an assignment. I'm sitting at the table in the staff room with Coach Bielema, and he empowered each of us to, or assigned each of us to kind of give maybe like a presentation to the staff of some things that you had learned in your background. And he has actually assigned it. So one of the things he assigned me was what your question is, what did I glean from my time as an educator in Bentonville High School, and how did that help me make me a better coach? And so I was actually a PE teacher. Now, if you were in one of my PE classes, it was a pre-AP or AP PE, I like to call it. So we tried to take it to another level. That always alarmed them, by the way. 7th and 8th graders, if you tell them the first day that it's AP PE, that'll freak them out, right? So don't do that. They just want to be in normal PE. But in all seriousness, during my time as a educator, there's a lot of training that goes on, right? And one of the things that they spend an extensive amount of time with training is teaching you how to reach your students, right? And obviously, as a PE teacher, I didn't do a lot of classroom work with them. I did a lot of organizational things. But one of the things I committed myself to do, here I am, I was the co-offensive coordinator, play caller at San Jose State, 2004. I made a transition back to high school, which is a really pretty lengthy story in itself, but really at the root of that was a family issue. I thought it was going to be a pit stop for me. It turned into a significant amount of time. And so my first year, here I am going from play caller, co-offensive coordinator at San Jose State to now part of my assignments at Bentonville was coaching and teaching 7th grade PE. And I really had to make a decision professionally, like, okay, here's what I made a decision I was going to do. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right? If I was going to do it, I was going to try to be the best educator and teacher that I could be. And so I really tried to jump into that world and learn. And so during those in-services, when they taught you about the different types of learners, right? A visual learner, a kinesthetic learner, an auditory learner, that stuff really kind of enlightened me to, I've got a room full of guys here as an offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, that each one of them, even though I may have 5 quarterbacks in the room, there may be, 2 of them that learn through visual learning. There may be one that learns through hearing and can grasp it, but yet there may be yet one more that needs a walkthrough to make that come to life. And so that moment in time for me, that period of time, was really beneficial to me, because it helped open my eyes to that not everybody learns like Barry Lunney, right? I have a certain way of learning, just like each and every one of you on the screen do today. And so that time was really beneficial for me to help peel back, when I'm teaching and I'm communicating, I'm talking to a wide variety of learners. And so I've tried to be very conscientious of that moving forward. I think that's helped me become a better coach.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you, Gavin.
Hey, Coach, nice to meet you. Alec Bussey, welcome to Champaign. Quick kind of question. Coach Bielema mentioned the term Tempro for tempo and pro style. As an offensive coordinator and quarterback, how does that kind of influence what you do with a quarterback position?
Well, that's just something that kind of Coach and I, we at UTSA, we kind of, sit around the table and, some of these systems have names or whatnot. And I'm not saying that's the name of our system, but if you just it's kind of a snappy little way of, to say, hey, we want to play with tempo, but this isn't like, torrid pace. I think if you looked at our time of possession last year, one of the things that we did in our system is play complementary team football, right? That's going to be critical to our success here. We're not trying to play so fast that we put our defense in jeopardy by playing a bunch of snaps and having to be on the field with quick turnaround. But yet we want to be able to have enough pace in our system to affect the defense. At the end of the day, one of the things that I want to do, one of the things that I have a vision for, and one of the things that we did at UTSA is we tried to change the pace of the game. Like we wanted to dictate the pace of the game, whether it be a quick play, a no huddle, a fast huddle, like all these different ways that you're able to do that. That's really important that we do that because I think that's a weapon for you offensively. And so that name is not anything that, it's just something that Coach and I identified with as we talked over the last few days about like, really, okay, we don't play tempo, but we do not want to lose the elements of pro style football, right? That that have stood the test of time. B is certainly foundation of Coach Bielema's belief and mine as well. And so there's a certain, there's a certain mentality of pro style football that we're not going to gravitate away from, but also trying to blend this with maybe being in the, at the line more, being in the gun a little bit more than what's been done here, but in the past.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
We're going to wrap up with that.
Yeah.
Brett's telling me that we're going to wrap it up.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Barry.